masking the threat, really something that's pretty pervasive these days. And kind of the real life stories, I think, of business email compromise. And, it's something that I think people hear a lot about, in the news and, kind of, news articles or research, but, what actually is it, right? And then how do we address that? I think that's the important part here that we're going to be exploring together. So yeah, I figured we'd start out, kind of identify who is speaking today. So you got, myself, Andrew Scott. I am a security solutions advisor here at Total. And we're joined by Rich Miller, founder, president, and CEO of Stack Cybersecurity. Welcome, Rich. You want to give a little introduction about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I am Rich Miller and founder and CEO of Stack Cybersecurity. As you mentioned, we formerly were AM Data Service, focused for the last 20 years on the managed services space, and now have made a shift into a more security focused approach to managed services because we're just seeing the landscape change so much. We feel like we have to pivot. We have to be more educational. We have to be more consultative on the security landscape and the threat landscape and the security needs to combat that. So
Yeah,
we've
absolutely.
migrated into Stack Cybersecurity, and we are a very unique hybrid of a managed service provider and a managed security service provider.
Excellent. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. With the importance of security as part of IT services and operations, and kind of being an MSP, really those security leaning secure business services kind of concept is incredibly important these days. So to highlight we're really what we're going to talk about, we're going to really take a look at what is the evolving threat landscape here as it relates to business email compromise. We're going to take a look at some of these metrics, some of the numbers. It's pretty jarring, what we're seeing from the field. Also, kind of what you all at Stack are seeing, and also what Total, right, sees across, all of the, many thousands of end user organizations that we're, observing this activity from. We're going to talk about, how does this work, right? How does actually BEC happen? So what are some techniques that adversaries are using? And then really, what does this mean for your business, right? There can be a lot of implications and consequences, unfortunately, when organizations may fall victim to business email compromise. And then some of the challenges, right? As adversaries are evolving, really, so do, defensive capabilities need to evolve with those. And what are some of the challenges that we're seeing organizations either grappling with? I'd love to get your perspectives on that as well, Rich. And then what can we do forward, right? What are the next steps? There's got to be a way. And so, we'll kind of close out with some, a little bit of positivity there, I think, to talk about kind of what these strategies are. Awesome. So, kind of taking a look at, BEC, I think by the numbers, right? So, kind of we also look at what is business email compromise. So it is, one of the most financially damaging online kind of cyber attack, type crimes and activity. Okay. So what this really is that criminals are gaining access to legitimate business emails and then using that, right, to either ask other vendors to pay invoices or payroll changes, or they're going to, kind of manipulate internal users, supply chain partners to be able to funnel money to the adversary's bank account instead of, yours. So this can really increase a lot of fraud, create, kind of major financial implications for organizations that may fall victim to this. It can also be, hey, person as CEO, really that pressure, right, or from leadership of, I need you to go make these purchases. I need you to process these invoices, really applying that pressure where it looks like it's actually coming from that legitimate user because their account has been taken over and they are being effectively masquerading as those legitimate users. Alternatively, it may not also be for paying invoices or kind of financial fraud or pressuring in some manner. They could be using that user's access in the environment to go ahead and move around clandestinely that environment to identify and steal either sensitive information, intellectual property, kind of user information, right? If you're in the market of kind of collecting customer sensitive data, healthcare information, they're going to steal that. And then they're going to go ahead and offer it up for sale on the dark web and so forth. So this is also a very kind of stealthy approach of using users' identities and compromising that to evade detection, but also to really steal information. So we've heard a lot about, we're not going to get into today, but, ransomware, right? That's always in the news where they're encrypting and locking up environments. Adversaries are also shifting now towards simply using stolen credentials or business email compromised account takeover to stay hidden within the needle within the needle stack, so to speak, and then be able to exfiltrate that data without deploying ransomware. So this is another really significant shift in adversary attack vectors and methodologies that we as defenders really need to start, and organizational owners and leaders need to be aware of and how to address. Okay, and so we look at some of the numbers on the right hand side. The BEC losses, right? The implications of either financial losses or complaints continue to go up. But also, as we notice, the complaints are, it cratered there in 2020. It's been slowly ticking up for 2022 and 2023. But really, those yellow bars are the important ones to pay attention to, that this is increasingly more, adaptive and stealthy activity, right? But it's also incredibly financially rewarding for those adversaries. So, Rich, I would love your perspective and experience here. What type of business email compromise activity and threats are you seeing organizations or your customers currently facing?
We are seeing we're seeing a lot of activity with business email compromise. It's nearly growing out of control, but most of what we're seeing is a lay in wait. And lay in wait is where a user may click a link, which we identify that often, or it could be a browser hijack or a drive-by or any of this type of stuff. But ultimately, what's happening is the bad person is getting access to your email, and so this isn't necessarily just them getting your computer and all of a sudden you see your mouse moving around, right? This is harvesting your credentials on the fly and then going out to Outlook web access on their own browser and then perusing your email at their leisure. And so ultimately what the lay in wait is that they are now in your mailbox and they're watching your email. They're figuring out who you communicate with, who the boss is, who your creditors are, who your vendors are, and then they're waiting for the right opportunity. It could be, and actual situations where we've seen, it could be when you are building a new office space and it's time to put a deposit down on a building, and all of a sudden they jump in and redirect your mail, and next thing you know, you're communicating with them and not your bank for wire information. Or we've seen where the president of a company is working on a deal to line up new business or something like that, and when it reaches contract stage, then the threat actor or the bad person is injecting themselves into that process, and then the contract that goes out is a malicious link, and the recipient who was expecting a contract clicks the link because they were expecting it. Right. So if Andrea, if you and I are working on doing a deal and I say, okay, I'm good to go, everything looks good, send over the DocuSign, and then all of a sudden I receive a DocuSign 20 minutes later, but you didn't send it, I'm still clicking it
Right.
because I was expecting it. So that's our biggest
100%.
thing is the lay in wait. And the thing about a lay in wait is when the threat actor gets that foothold, you don't necessarily know it. You may not know it for weeks, days, weeks, months, and that's where the longevity of SIEM comes into play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm really glad, you mentioned the time, right? I think a lot of times, we may think about attacks happening, right? As you mentioned, you suddenly see your mouse moving, or, you may think about that, or, oh my God, there's malware or something, suddenly, alerts are firing and so forth. This is definitely a low and slow, more stealthy type attack where, we really have to have that longer term perspective and the ability to look across time periods and understand that to be able to, properly detect this. So, Total recently also produced some pretty unique and pretty impressive research. I figured I'd, also highlight, we talked about some of these threat actors. Well, let's talk about one of them. So we identified, a recent threat actor group waging a campaign against all various industries, right? As we see here on the, listed on the screen, but also organizations, sizes targeted. Yes, there was definitely small and medium-sized businesses, right? Target is part of that, where, under 150 employees, but also really into mid-market, right? 150 to 2,000. So no one is really, I think, too small, to be targeted with this is a big takeaway. But effectively, this was a very, consistent an in-depth, campaign using, dozens of different data centers across the United States and the world to be able to wage, business email compromise campaigns. And what they were doing was primarily targeting, as you mentioned, harvesting credentials, whether it's through phishing or using their own, login page redirects or buying credentials, that had already previously been compromised. But effectively targeting Microsoft O365 was the biggest, most targeted resource we saw, right? Obviously, majority of organizations are using Microsoft services, especially those cloud services through 365 and so forth. But this paints a large target on organizations' backs because they're going to, kind of target this rather than simply hacking in, they're logging in, right? And kind of, capturing that. And so what we saw was a 558% increase in identity-related attacks. Right, and that's significant. That speaks that, you're mentioning the speed at which, volume which you guys are facing these attacks and seeing this, Rich. This is the new normal. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, right? That we have to be looking at as defenders is really at the identity, understand the supply chain, where organizations fit within that, and then be able to identify, these indicators of possible compromise or attack within that. So, if we look at, we talked about, kind of some of these attack vectors. Well, let's walk through briefly, how these work at a high level, right? And you already started to allude to some of this, and I appreciate, that context there, Rich. So starting left to right, so there's an attack, sequence, which could be called adversary in the middle. So what this is the adversary is standing up a login page that looks almost exactly like the one that a user, an organization has. And so they're actually redirecting, right, through, kind of poisoning the user's, navigation or sending a link through phishing often. They're having them redirect to the legitimate, to the illegitimate attacker operated phishing site. Okay, so it's stealing those credentials, it's stealing the MFA tokens and those session tokens, which is going to keep those sessions alive. So unfortunately, even if, MFA, right, as solid and robust as it is and a great best practice, right, there are now adversary techniques about leveraging stolen session tokens and cookies to bypass MFA, right? So kind of really we have to be assuming also that maybe this, may happen, right? And so that we have to look beyond just MFA can't just be the only bullet, kind of silver bullet. Additionally, SharePoint phishing, right? I mentioned O365, but really exploiting these services of, hey, I want to share files with you. I want to, collaborate. And as you mentioned, Rich, they're really watching and understanding how organizations are working, right? There's a lot in the news. So being aware, hey, yeah, we got a contract to build a new building. We got it with this construction company. An adversary is going to see that, and that's a great avenue in. They're going to compromise maybe one of two, or send a link looking like it's from someone else. They're going to spoof that, see if they can go and grab those credentials to get in. Finally, right, we kind of showed it a couple slides ago, but really the prevalence of, an attacker, specializes in what's called initial access brokers. And these are organizations on the dark web, adversary groups, that specialize in harvesting and stealing credentials to organizations and then selling them to bad actors who want to then follow on and maybe, conduct financial crimes or find, fraud or even ransomware data extortion. They're selling them for, sometimes very, very cheap, right? And kind of myself, having lived in the world of, cyber intelligence and some of that dark web investigation in the past, I'm sure you've seen this too, Rich, right? These are very prevalent actors. Initial access brokers is something I think people really need to be aware of. And so, question really here for you, Rich, what threat vectors and patterns, like I'm, showing here, you already kind of alluded to some, are you currently observing? But, I think more importantly, how are you detecting and responding to these? Kind of what is the workflow that you're seeing of how to address some of these threats that we're showing on the screen here?
So yeah, this is an interesting slide. with credential validation and the ability to capture your credentials, this is something that at Stack Cyber we're planning to expand on. So I'm actually working on a webinar in a month or so where it'll be a technical webinar where we're going to go through an attack, and we'll have Javon Bragg, our lead information security analyst. We just call him Lisa. He's going to actually capture your session token while logging into M365 and show you on that webinar how quickly you can spin that around and log into your mail without anyone knowing it, set up an RSS feed, redirect all your messages to them. And then, so that happens a lot. We're seeing how quickly that can happen. With adversary in the middle, here's a really interesting concept. So the ability to stand up a wireless access point now is very, very quick, very easy. And I'm referencing this from an adversary's perspective, right? There are tools out there. One is called a wireless pineapple, one's called a flipper zero. We actually have some of these tools that we use to test, to learn ways to combat this stuff. But I could stand up a wireless hotspot in any location, an airport, a Starbucks or something like that. And what's really interesting that people don't realize is when you connect to a wireless access point on your laptop stores that information. And then forever and a day, when you boot your laptop, it's always checking to see if that wireless access point's available. And if it is, it'll connect. And a really great example of this would be like, for example, Hilton Honors. My laptop has H Honors stored as a wireless access point. They don't change their password, but once a quarter, every 6 months, I could go to a Starbucks and stand up a Flipper Zero fake Wi-Fi, call it H Honors, and you'd be about guaranteed that someone's laptop will connect to that hotspot. And then what happens is I pop up the thing saying, oh, you've been disconnected from M365, re-authenticate. And the first thing they do is plug in their username, plug in their password. Boom, I've got it. So I've harvested their credentials. I can pop over to my real website, and I may even send them response and say, okay, all good. Go ahead and keep working.
Yep.
So that's a lot of adversary in the middle, kind of morphing into credential validation and harvesting. And then along the way, you present them with fake sites like fake SharePoint sites, anything to get them to say, hey, I just had it. My wireless went down at my house, and now my computer pops up saying, hey, there's a certificate error connecting to Outlook, re-authenticate. And we're so quick to do that, but we need to have red flags up everywhere.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think we're, starting to, we'll hit on this a little bit, but, really the importance of understanding your users' posture and that education component as well, and how a security aware culture is key, is in part of battling this too, not just, kind of getting the visibility, and the response functions, but, warding this off, right? Everything you're talking about is simply manipulating human behavior, and really exploiting the biggest human weakness, biggest weakness in organizations is the users and the humans. And so, having organizations really be mindful of that. Yeah.
One thing that we're really pressing hard for is when we're discussing cybersecurity with businesses. I kind of try to put it on the business to say that the business has a responsibility of doing everything it can to prevent the users from having to make such sophisticated IT decisions, right? Why put it in the hands of a user to determine if a SSL credential or an SSL certificate is valid or not? They don't know what that is, and so the business needs to protect its users from having to make decisions that they're not prepared to make.
Yep, 100%. I couldn't agree more there. So, I think, you mentioned the business, and that's a great segue. I think, getting into what does this mean, right, for you? So there are some consequences really, but I think this is, yes, it's scary, but, let's just rip that Band-Aid off, right? As a security industry, but also end user organizations, as you mentioned, we just have to simply accept what we're up against and then develop that path forward. So, there's really, some implications we wanted to highlight here, and this is not exhaustive, but we already talked about financial loss, right? Where adversaries may be impersonating executives or vendors, for fraudulent wire transfers, fake invoices, things like that. Really, this is also really understanding and it's for, our attendees here on the phone, right? Understanding your place in your industry vertical, but also the supply chain, who you do business with, how that's done, right? And really kind of what those implications can be, right? Kind of some of that, and that can also identify maybe there's process improvements there that can be made, kind of, secondary approvals, things like that, before, wires are, transfers are made and so forth. Reputational damage then as well, right? That compounds obviously if, supplier, if you're, you have wire invoicing, or, someone, if people don't get paid, right, or other vendors don't get paid, or things like that, that can damage business relationships, right? But also really, loss of sensitive information, right? Maybe there's a data breach, notification you have to send out. I'm sure we've all gotten them recently. But now, unfortunately, it's kind of it's another one, but it really sticks with end user customers too, right? It reduces that confidence where you're like, I got to go through this again. You lost my data. There's a lot of implications there, and really understand, accepting kind of the impact on your customers and users if that data, right, is compromised, or if that's lost. Because it's just more heartache, right? My mom, for instance, had her information lost, through a compromise, and now has to be doing, additional, tax return, kind of submissions, which is time consuming, lengthy, all because her identity was stolen through
Happened to my
a
daughter.
breach. Yeah. And so it's like tons of time she has to spend. She's in mid-70s. She doesn't want to have to deal with this, but it's like 9 more steps basically she has to take with the IRS just to submit her taxes, because her information was compromised. And she's told me she won't do business with that organization again that was compromised, that she lost from.
Yeah.
So,
My
finally then,
daughter's 20
yeah,
years
go ahead.
old, and her very first tax return, she
Yep.
had to jump through hoops because they wrote her and said, "Sorry, you've already filed a tax return, and we've already
Hey,
sent you a refund." So
yeah,
it's out there.
it,
One of the really important things I want to point out here is
yeah,
the technical landscape is always changing. Everyone knows that. With the
right.
cybersecurity landscape, I just recently experienced a change, a level up, if you will. So get this. Imagine a business's creditor reaching out. So this business had a business email compromise. This business's creditor reached out and said, "Hey, we've noticed that you sent us a malicious email. We've
Oof.
investigated this. We've found the email to be malicious. We are ceasing communication with you, and we're stopping at this moment doing business with you until you can explain yourself," right? And so then they said,
Right. Oh
"Please
man.
answer these questions." And these questions were invasive. We're talking how many users were compromised, what data was compromised, how did they get in, was there lateral movement, was any of it PII, have you contacted the authorities, what have you done to mitigate this from happening again, what are your efforts to clean it up? And they want a report. And they said, until you answer these questions, we're no longer accepting email from you. And this is a creditor. This is, like, this is something someone needs. Imagine your line of credit getting put on hold or something like that. It's the first time that I've seen a vendor or creditor basically cut ties and say, until you can show us that your posture is solid, we're all set, right?
Yeah.
We see financial loss every month. We see reputation damage a lot. When the CEO or CFO of a large organization that's well known in town sends out a malicious DocuSign link to everyone in his 347 contacts, there's reputation damage there.
100%. Yeah, and that's, I think I really appreciate that example there, Rich, right? But I think it's a just, helpful for folks on the line really to understand. But I think, more so even, right, for our attendees, kind of that perspective and implications also, kind of share, right, that with your peers, your business partners, other things, right? It's really the understanding of, there's a lot of implications that can be had on a business from this. And so, the more that I think we can get, folks aware of these attack vectors, the more it'll happen, and just simply, hey, how ready are we to address this? So, it takes us to our next section, right? We talked, it's been a lot of, gloom and doom, but rightfully so. It's a big topic and scary, but there are ways through this, right? So we're going to start to shift towards being a little bit more positive, and what can we do about this? So, as we talked about there, these attack vectors are really, more and more increasingly difficult to detect. A lot of the standard, kind of security capabilities and so forth that organizations may have relied upon, endpoint security, antivirus, maybe there's a little bit of level up of, endpoint text response right in place, but this is now leveraging really the identity, right, and the user credentials. And so this is now, we have to be, as I said, looking at the needle in the needle stack, so to speak, right? And so, that lack of obvious malware, use of legitimate accounts, that low and slow, more stealthy, lie in wait approach, is now what we need to be looking at. And so, to meet this, visibility is really, really essential, right? So, just simply we have to accept that endpoint security, excuse me, sorry, is not enough, unfortunately, right? That doesn't provide visibility into, more of these cloud services or the identity and kind of what's going on. However, right, use of tools like a security information event management solution, really a centralized logging analysis and correlation engine, that capability to be able to look across an organization's activity and logs and data, and understand what is and is not normal, and are these users legitimate or not, or what are these triggers showing. But I think increasingly too, like, I'm really glad you mentioned at the start, Rich, right, that security services, really security forward, service providers can really help fill a gap of, maybe there's a capabilities or a skills or a time gap that organizations have. But, would love, kind of your perspectives here, especially around, the importance of SIM. I think, you and I had a lot of discussions about this, but would love your take here for the audience on why a SIM is so critical around what we're talking about today.
Yeah, SIM is very critical, also known as SIEM. I go back and forth with my
Which one
pronunciation.
it is?
SIEM and SIM, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's very critical. And again, when I do a technical demonstration, when we do that hack that we're going to show, we're also going to show how SIM will illustrate what's happening. So SIM it's extremely robust. Okay, so imagine logging, right? But logging at the level of, we're capturing every log on, log off for every user's computer, every website that they go to, we're logging every email that comes in, every attachment that's opened, every file that's opened from your network, every file that's deleted, every file that's emailed out, forwarded, any of that stuff. So it's a really, really robust logging engine. Okay, and there are many SIMs out there, and standing up your own SIM is really, really difficult, right? So we depend on a partner. Obviously, Total is our partner of choice, mostly because Total's SIM interaction is extremely robust. So all this logging that's being dumped into this central location, it's all well and good, but it's really hard to do anything with it, right? And so having a SOC, which is why we rely on Total, having a SOC, which is a security operations center, which is 24/7 man and woman IT engineers watching all of these logs happen and using filtering techniques and potentially AI stuff like that to identify the flags, right? So and we can build those flags based on rule sets. So we may have a client that has um, uh, their secret sauce or their intellectual property is contained in documents. So we can set up rules that say every time a Word document is sent, forwarded, from a user's work email to what appears to be like a Yahoo, Gmail, AOL type of email, we flag that, right? And log it. So what SIM's doing is it's logging all of that. It's giving us 24/7 exposure into what's happening. And then when there is an issue, the SOC can take immediate action. And the toughest thing about SIM and what it's really important for is the historical view, right? So we monitor 7-day, 30-day, and 90-day. We can go back as far as a year, but nobody really buys a year. It's very cost prohibitive. But 90-day is what we prefer. And so when you have, let's say, a business email compromise, and all of this has happened, we find out that you put a client puts in a ticket that says, hey, someone just emailed us and said they got an invoice from us that we didn't send. Okay, well, this sounds like a business email compromise. So at Stack Cyber, we actually have incident response playbooks. We will investigate this and initiate a playbook. But what we do is we go to SIM. That is our tool of choice because it's logging every single tidbit of everything that happens. So we can go back in time and look for the email where we saw the malicious link come through. And then we can trace that where we can see that the threat actor or bad person then went to this website and downloaded this file, and this file was installed on this computer in this directory with this executable, and then it was also moved over to this directory. We can trace every single tidbit of all of that, and what we're doing is we're figuring out when it came in, we're figuring out if it moved around, or if it was moved around laterally, and who else is infected, right? So the toughest thing about a business email compromise, I might be getting a little bit off topic, but toughest thing about a business email compromise is if you call in and say, hey, we sent out this bad link without SIM and without MXDR and without the SOC, really what we can do is, okay, we're going to reset your MFA, we're going to reset your password, and we can run a virus scan on your computer. But we don't know anything else beside that. We have no visibility into what's happening. Whereas a client that has SIM in place or a business that has SIM in place, we could actually spend weeks trolling through logs, and we can determine with really high degree of certainty the message came in here, it was sent by this, which was spoofed by this country and this sender, and it was also forwarded to here, and it looks like it was copied to this directory, and it hasn't moved anywhere else. So we think if we clean up these two computers, we're good, right?
Yeah.
That's what SIM does for us. It's extremely important.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate all the, kind of considerations and detail around that. I mean, I think there's a couple big takeaways, kind of from that. One is, it's like a detective trying to solve a crime. We all watch, CSI or Law and Order, right? That it's hard to really solve a murder, crime as a homicide detective, let's say, without clues, right? You can kind of make assumptions, but you don't really know, did you get the right guy or gal? Not sure, right? So that's one big thing. The other thing for folks, I think on the line, you mentioned, right, the example of the organization with the creditor, but coming out of right these incidents, or if there's something happened, they're requesting that report, you got to be able to have the detail and documented evidence to be able to provide that, especially for organizations that may be working in regulated environments, right? Certain compliance controls and certain things. One, you have to be logging this stuff anyways. But if something, God forbid, were to happen, like a BEC or data exfiltration or things of that nature, those incident reports are going to be required to document kind of what was root cause. You got to be able to look backwards, but also be able to trace this through to make sure that nothing else was stolen. It's not merely, hey, I'm going to reset a user's credentials. How do we know, right, that no information was exfiltrated, that there wasn't anything else? There's no other methods of persistence going on, that even if you reset the credentials, they've still created 5 other accounts and you're not sure, right? So, I think, kind of, looking at then, I think some of the financial benefits, right? We're talking about, hey, yeah, there's capabilities that are needed, and you mentioned cost, right? There is that consideration, but if we look at, kind of it's really a risk tolerance, I think, discussion as well for organizations and about their data, what they need to be doing. But you kind of highlighted here, and this is taken from IBM's, cost of data breach report, but after employee training, which we hit on really, but, SIM and AI learning, insights, really kind of using technology really to drive a lot of the enablement of awareness in this stuff are, really the top, two and three, second and third, strongest factors in reducing average breach costs, right? So, if you didn't have this, right, or SIM wasn't there, right, that visibility, what impact would this have on a business to be able to detect this stuff, to be able to respond, to be able to work through the recovery process there? And you mentioned also, incident response playbooks and so forth, right? So we look at an IR team, look at an MSSP down below. There's a lot of these components that can really reduce the average breach cost. But also, right, cyber insurance is something that comes up a lot. More and more organizations are looking for a little help. These are also techniques, right, or capabilities, excuse me, that will also help satisfy a lot of cyber insurance policy requirements, which can also help drop premiums. So, while some of this may be costly in some manner, or increased costs, there's also a lot of risk reduction and satisfaction of, cyber insurance policies, lowering costs and other things in certain areas. And so, I think really, right, being able to save an average, you see those numbers there in the middle of 2.22 million per breach, right, compared to those that aren't, it's, do we spend a couple of million later? Or, how do we, start to leverage more of a security capability and strategy with various providers to close those needs or to offset or augment existing capabilities, right? So, Rich, what are your thoughts here? And you see kind of working most with your clients, or organizations coming to you for guidance here around some of these things that can help, alleviate, financial pain or breaches, going forward.
Well, I hope we have another hour.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we're seeing a lot of activity. Cybersecurity insurance is really big. Insurance companies are sending out these questionnaires, and they are getting bigger and bigger, right? And it depends on the type of agency you're looking at. Some agencies have a 3-page questionnaire, and others I've seen 54 pages of detail. And 44% is the number. 44% of cybersecurity insurance claims are not paid.
Yeah.
So when you fill out these questionnaires, number one, you want to do them as accurately as possible, because if you don't, you're opening up to being part of that 44%. Number two is you need to be able to have your posture in place anyway, and the questions that they are asking are valid. That right, they're
Yes.
relevant. So what we're trying to do is we're really trying to educate uh, businesses. So when I'm looking at this stack on the slide here, um, we are trying to push the business to do to have seen, right? We're trying to push the business to have encryption in place, threat intelligence in place, have an incident response plan, um, endpoint security, managed detection and response. We're pushing the business to have all of this stuff in an effort to combat the very top item, employee training. Along with all of that, we try to get the businesses to do user security and awareness training. And by the cybersecurity insurance standards, that's just once a year that they really look for that. We
Right.
run fresh campaigns every month, and when we fish users, we fish them hard. And there's a conflicting viewpoint on how to handle this, right? Some people are saying, "Oh, well, you're going to, you're going to numb your users to all of this, so they're not going to trust anything, yada yada yada." And our philosophy is we want to fish them very hard because we want them to consider everything a threat. A really great scenario in is Tom, my COO. I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago. I walked away with a great takeaway from a speaker. I emailed that speaker and said, "Hey, can I get a copy of the video?" copied Tom. And the speaker said, yeah, absolutely. I'll send over the link, copied Tom. Tom gets the link. I said, did you watch that video? He goes, no, I didn't click on that link. Right? That's what we
Yeah.
want. That is cautious.
Right.
That is considering everything a red flag. And he then later put the time in to vet the link and make sure that it was good before he just clicked it and moved on. Because, again, getting to that man in the middle, that was an opportunity for a threat actor to inject their attack, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to, as I mentioned before, we're trying to get the business to handle all of the threat landscape uh, uh, mitigation and and not have the user have to make all these decisions, right? So user security awareness training is key, but along the way, we have to give the users the best chance to not fail, right? The
Right.
current
Right.
landscape, like most businesses that don't have a cybersecurity posture, their position is we're not going to do everything or we're not going to do anything, and we'll just depend on the user to make good decisions. And here's a 15-minute training on how to not click on links or how to hover over a link and be cautious. How is that fair? How is that fair to the users when they're trying to focus on running a project or they're trying to focus on building a PowerPoint or they're trying to focus on getting a contract to signature, and all of a sudden they have to be a cybersecurity analyst in the middle of all that?
Yeah.
So we
No, I'm
stack
so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, we stack all these tools and tell the business you need all of this stuff to best suit your user to make the best decision, and then train them because they are the number one link to threat adversaries gaining a foothold.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, it's really at the bottom line, right? Security enabling, right, the business to be most effective and efficient at what it needs to do and so forth. So, I know we're almost at time here. So, kind of wanted to just summarize, we've been, kind of adding some of this in throughout our discussion here today, Rich, which is great, but really, what we're highlighting is the importance of obviously gaining certain capabilities, right? A SIM can really help with this, but also really embracing a security strategy, right? And a layer defense in various different manners, and how that can be, really a strong approach to, driving a business forward, right? And kind of, having security enable, right, that business without, kind of taking it down or offsetting that, right? So, a couple, strategies really to embrace, right? I mentioned MFA not being as robust, but it's still, we got to have it, right? Kind of MFA for a user validation perspective and being able to log those MFA actions, right? The pushes, the acceptances, right? And that needs to go into that SIM, right? And implementing really not just endpoint, right, detection response, but identity threat detection response, really kind of being able to respond and identify what is going on with user actions, right? That user analytics component. And then the right, kind of service provider or capabilities to fit those organizations' needs, right? There's a lot of options out there, but being able to find the right solution, obviously, Total and our partner Stack feel very strongly that, we can bring that to you, attendees here on the phone, but also in general, right? But really being aware of what's, kind of really that security strategy and thinking about prevention, detection, response all throughout this attack chain that we've been discussing today. So, Rich, I wanted to, kind of, summarize here, a little bit what you kind of talk about, talk a little bit about, but, kind of how you're supporting business email compromise. I think, there's something you wanted to also potentially offer, some of the folks on the line, talk about some stuff, but I figure we close out with that and kind of how Stack can help the attendees here on the line.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make less of an effort at a sales pitch and more of an educational effort. This is what I really was trying to accomplish here is educating uh, clients or potential clients or just businesses in general and people that are running businesses the importance of SIM and the importance of some of these tools, right? So um, when you add on all of these tools, they are helping make you compliant. They're helping make you meet regulatory needs, all of which are coming. We're seeing it so much where bigger businesses are demanding smaller businesses be compliant and have these postures in place. And so, really, we're here to educate. If there's more that I can help educate someone on, I encourage them to give us a call. We're specifically not going to follow up this webinar with mailers saying, "Hey, can we schedule a meeting?" We're not going to do that, right? We're here. We're here to answer questions. We're here to educate you. Obviously, we will pitch you, but this is about making sure you understand the value of these tools. And if we can go into more detail and show that to you personally, individually, you're more than welcome to reach out. You can respond to the chat. You can put in there that we can contact you. Any of that stuff. We are going to follow this up. I don't have a set date yet, but we'll send out a notification to the same email list that we used for this webinar. We're going to send out notifications, and we are going to perform a essentially a live hack, right? Javon, our Lisa, is going to do some credential harvesting from a 365 account, show how quick and easy. Andrew, I could get you to click a link, capture your account, troll your email, and send Darren a message saying, Rich is amazing. We're going to show that. And then once we do that, we're going to then go into SIEM or SIM, and we're going to spend some time tracing how all that happens and tracing and seeing data exfiltration, seeing lateral movement, seeing executable files being dropped into Windows directories, that sort of thing. So we're really just trying to educate to get these tool sets in place so that we can be a partner and help businesses secure themselves.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that. I think that's fantastic, right? It's obviously October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so I think that was one of our objectives together as well, is to help educate, right, just the market and the industry in general, and to things they need to be really considering and thinking about here. So I know that we're a little bit over time here, so really appreciate everyone's attendance. Do we have any questions or anything like that in the Q&A, or does anyone want to kind of review anything? Zach on the line, do we have any questions come in?
We do. We have one that's asking for the difference between an MSP and an MSSP.
Yeah, absolutely. Rich, you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. Yeah. So managed services, which is MSP, managed service provider, managed services was born from the runaway costs of general break fix IT support. So in the past, 10, 15 years ago, you just had an IT company, and when something broke, you call them and they come fix it and they send you a bill. This was about managed services was about leveling your IT spend. And the premise was, if I employ monitoring and maintenance, think Windows patching, OS patching and antivirus and anti-malware, then I can keep your computer from breaking. So I make money by charging you a flat rate. You make money by not having your computers down. So I'm proactively trying to fix them. That's all managed services ever was. It was really Windows support coupled with a couple of tools, mostly antivirus, anti-spam, anti-malware. A managed security or managed security service provider, MSSP, that was born from the need for cybersecurity specific tool sets. And the old guard of MSSPs were companies, similar to Total, right? You have a robust platform, so a business, think Ford, can employ Total's tool set and secure their organization. And they've got SASE, they've got SIEM, they've got MXDR, they've got EDR, and they've got SOC behind all of that, right? And so MSSPs just sold tools; they never did support. And where we're trying to bridge that gap is we're trying to, I don't really consider the old guard MSSPs anymore, right? Because they're not doing any service. They're just selling tools. So we're doing the service. We're blending the managed services with a security forward purpose. And not only are we securing your environment, we're helping you be more compliant. We're helping you be more insurable. We're helping you be more recoverable. And at the same time, we're mitigating the net result of a breach or of a compromise when you do have it, because it is coming.
Yeah.
And
No, great.
MSSPs don't do that, right? We're changing the game.
100%. Yeah, and I just actually looked at the Q&A, and Patrick, looks like he got a couple good questions, right? And I think it really alludes to what Rich was just saying. So, Patrick, you asked about, on that list, right? MSSPs were at the bottom, but kind of, hey, what about the ROI? And I think this really gets to the importance, right, Richard, what you were just saying is that, while there are a lot of MSSPs, administrating tools and so forth, it's really about the outcomes and how that MSSP or kind of more modern MSP, as you're saying, Rich, kind of a stack is sitting in there, is really able to protect a business, right? The outcomes and services they're going to provide beyond just simply tools, but also really supporting that business moving forward, right? So, I don't know if you have any perspectives there, Rich, right? But, really, hey, the MSSP was at the bottom of the IBM list, right? But I think it's really about the way that all the capabilities in that list are administrated and operationalized and provided to, organizations. I don't know if you have, kind of your thoughts on the
Yeah,
comments that they've said.
yeah, I'm very confident that the context of the list from IBM doesn't see MSSPs as we see them now, and we believe they're heading, right? This is think CrowdStrike. Everyone has heard of CrowdStrike, right? CrowdStrike is not in the business of standing up a new computer install or servicing your Outlook error or servicing your printer, right? They're just a delivery mechanism for tools. And I believe that's why they're categorized low, because ultimately uh, 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 a newfangled MSSP like we are is delivering all of the tools in that stack. I think we account for nearly everything in there, um, short of intrusion detection systems, IDS. So I think the context is different in IBM's light. IBM also calls a small business 5,000 users and under, right? So it's just
Right.
it's a different mindset that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Any other questions from the audience? I know we're, again, as I said, over time, but really appreciate folks, staying on. Looks like you still got some good attendees and so forth on here, in a good amount, but wanted to make sure that folks got their questions answered. Any, thing else, obviously, feel free to reach back out to, to Rich or to myself, kind of to help facilitate anything that, kind of maybe stuck in in your minds afterwards.
Yeah, again, we're not doing this to sell, we're
Yep.
doing this to educate. So if there's a request for more detail, there's requests for more thorough understanding of SIM, I'd be happy to dig in and show how we analyze a compromise. Our engineers at Stack, they are constantly chomping at the bit to dive into SIM and investigate issues, and they get the opportunity nearly every day. But we can go into detail on SIM, we can go into detail on MXDR, and really illustrate, why your business needs these. And that may be the end user employing it. That may be a co-managed situation where an IT manager on site is making the decision to put these tools in place. But ultimately, from a cybersecurity awareness perspective, you need these tools.
100%. Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions coming in, but definitely lots to digest here, for folks. We went through a lot, but I think it, was incredibly valuable. I really appreciate your perspectives today, Rich, and got a lot from that too. So, I think we'll go ahead and let people drop, but really appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah.
Hopefully this was helpful, educational. Yeah, but please don't hesitate to reach out. Rich is a fantastic resource. Help just kind of educate the community on what they need to be doing, really consulting there. But yeah, appreciate everyone's time, and hope everyone has a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for putting this together, and thanks for having me involved. We really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for everything today. All right, folks,
Okay,
have a great weekend.
thanks.
We'll talk
Bye bye.
later. All right, bye.